Hello, and welcome to our Vehicle of the Week video presentation. We will be covering the Ariane 5 rocket, and we are Team A203, consisting of members Caleb, Chase, Jack, Michael, and Surya. The Ariane 5 is a two-stage heavy lift rocket consisting of two solid rocket motors, cryogenic propellants, and hypergolic propellants. The Ariane 5 is a European Space Agency rocket operated by Arianespace, the first commercial launch provider. The rocket was originally designed to be human-rated for the Hermes program before the program was canceled. The Ariane 5's heavy launch capability allows it to launch large payloads to low Earth orbit and geostationary orbit. The Ariane 5 is mainly utilized for its reliability and heavy lifting capabilities. Due to the cancellation of the Hermes program, the Ariane 5 is now only used for unmanned spacecraft. The rocket's abnormally large fairing capability allows it to carry two large satellites into low Earth orbit and a larger satellite into geostationary orbit. The European Space Agency is the sole operator of the Guinea Space Center, where Ariane 5 is launched, allowing them to launch frequently and on their own schedule. Here, we can see the Ariane 5 about to lift off. It starts by firing its main cryogenic engines alongside its two solid rocket motors.
In the early stages of design, the Ariane 5 was intended to be a heavy launch vehicle specifically for telecommunication satellites. Ariane 5s were developed to provide independent launch capabilities for European nations without having to rely on the space programs of other nations. Ariane 1 through 4 were similar three-stage rockets that used hypergolic and cryogenic propulsion systems. Europe aspired to achieve human spaceflight, but Ariane 4 was neither powerful enough and was not rated for human spaceflight. Ariane 5 was developed to be a safer, more powerful two-stage launch vehicle to be more reliable. By 1984, the ESA has plans for a mini space shuttle called the Hermes that would be launched in the fairing of Ariane 5. In 1992, the mission was canceled because the ESA allied with the Russian Aviation and Space Agency following the dissolution of the USSR. European nations now had access to the Soyuz, which was approved for human spaceflight, and the Hermes project was no longer needed. But Ariane 5's capability to launch multiple satellites into GTO and LEO made its development much worth its continuation.
The new Ariane 5 bears little resemblance to its previous models, and instead it's a complete redesign. The Ariane 5 now has a cryogenic first stage using liquid hydrogen and liquid oxygen and two very large solid rocket boosters. The Ariane 4 had a non-cryogenic hypergolic first stage using unsymmetrical dimethylhydrazine and dinitrogen tetroxide, and it also had two much smaller rocket boosters. Additionally, the new Ariane 5 is capable of lifting much larger payloads into low Earth orbit as well as geostationary orbit. On its first stage, the Ariane 5 has two very large solid rocket boosters paired with the cryogenic liquid oxygen and liquid hydrogen core stage. The solid rocket boosters burn for about 130 seconds, and the core stage burns for about 540 seconds. On the second stage, the Ariane 5 uses monomethylhydrazine and dinitrogen tetroxide, burning for about 945 seconds. Like many other rockets of today's age, they choose to use those hypergolic propellants in the second stage so that they can relight the engine as long as they have propellant left over. The Ariane 5 also has very large fairings that are usually jettisoned shortly after reaching about 100 kilometers. On June 4th, 1996, the Ariane 5 attempted its first flight, as you can see here. Unfortunately, there was a software bug with the flight computer allowing an integer overflow, which caused the rocket to erroneously determine that it needed to execute corrective maneuvers. As you can see here, it's flying straight for the most part. However, at about 37 seconds, it starts to tip over, and the aerodynamic forces tear the rocket apart, blowing it up. This error was actually present on the Ariane 4, but was never discovered because the Ariane 4 was not powerful enough to reach the velocities required to overflow that integer. Instead, the software was shut down at 40 seconds, and the Ariane 5 was able to go much faster and reach this error before 40 seconds.
The Ariane 5 is the heaviest and most capable rocket developed by the European Space Agency. And one of its most marketed improvements, as mentioned before, was the high payload weight capacity. In fact, the Ariane 5 has the capability to deliver over 20 metric tons to low Earth orbit, which is about 44,000 pounds, and about half that weight to geostationary transfer orbit, 10.8 tons, or about 24,000 pounds. One of the other marketed improvements is the large improvement in the payload volume capacity. As you can see on the diagram on the right, which the Ariane 5 is the fourth fairing from the left, the volume capacity is about 5.4 meters in diameter and approximately 17 meters high. Just to give you a bit of a sense for how large this truly is, the average US school bus is about 2.6 meters in width and about 14 meters in length. Hopefully that gives you a good visualization. A very unique feature to the Ariane 5 is the dual passenger adapter. As you can see on the bottom right image, it allows Ariane to stack over two full communication satellites into one fairing, or one large satellite into the fairing, such as the James Webb Space Telescope, as pictured in the bottom left image. A huge improvement is the shockless fairing, which essentially means that Ariane is using a mechanical separation method instead of explosives to split the seam on the fairing. This allows it to launch very delicate payloads, which is why this James Webb Space Telescope will be utilizing the Ariane 5's power. The Ariane 5 has launched over 109 times with a remarkable success rate of over 104 successes. Over the course of this time, over 300 primary satellites have been delivered by the rocket, meaning that most launches have made use of the payload adapter. Some of the most significant are the Rosetta satellite and the Philae lander, which is the top right image, which accomplished the first landing on Comet 64P or 67P. The Bepi Colombo Mercury mission is the top left image, which is the most complicated satellite to reach Mercury with over 4 stages in one. In addition, the Ariane 5 launched 5 ATVs to supply the International Space Station program over the course of 5 years, and was also chosen to launch the James Webb Space Telescope, as I mentioned earlier. An interesting statistic is that the Ariane 5 still holds the geostationary transfer orbit payload record of about 10.7 tons. Within this launch, they reached within 100 kilograms of their maximum capability, so this demonstrates success in razor-thin margins.
The Ariane 5 rocket is still in operation and continues to execute missions for commercial and governmental purposes. It is frequently used, having executed 3 successful launches in 2020. One particular launch took place on August 15, 2020, from Guinea Space Center in South America. It carried 3 satellites into orbit, including the Galaxy 30 satellite for Intelsat, the US communications provider. The satellite serves multiple purposes, but its deployment was primarily focused on providing North American customers with high-performance broadcast distribution capabilities. It also carried additional capabilities for stakeholders, including an L-band wide area augmentation system for the Federal Aviation Administration. This singular application is one of just hundreds of satellites that the Ariane 5 has launched into orbit, and the rocket's ability to reliably launch large masses of payload into space has not only cemented its respect in the space industry, but the service it provides has enhanced the world's ever-expanding communication network. There are currently missions planned through 2021, and the rocket will continue to launch from the Guinea Space Center. However, its lifespan is nearing a close. According to Daniel Neunschwander, Director of Space Transportation at the European Space Agency, Ariane 5 will undergo 8 more launches before it reaches retirement in 2022. Taking its place will be the Ariane 6. The Ariane 6 aims to lower this barrier of cost into the space industry, and it will provide 2 models, the A62 with 2 boosters and the A64 with 4 boosters. The A64 model will be able to carry up to 16,000 kilograms of payload and will stand at over 60 meters tall, weighing nearly 900 tons at takeoff. While on the surface, it may appear that the Ariane 6 is simply a larger version of the Ariane 5, the deployment of its payload model will be a powerful improvement. While the Ariane 5 focused on the launch of larger satellites, Ariane 6 has the capability to launch both heavy and light payloads. It does this through a piggybacking model that allows smaller satellites to fit into launches that were primarily intended for larger customers. The European Space Agency describes this capability as a rideshare service for small satellites, providing a cost-effective opportunity for growth in the space industry. While the use of the Ariane 5 rocket will cease in 2022, Ariane 6 will continue to provide similar launch opportunities for large satellites, while expanding the abilities of companies to launch small satellites into orbit.
In conclusion, the Ariane 5 proved the need and the effectiveness of heavy launch vehicles. This was especially necessary in today's small to mid-sized launch-saturated market. The Ariane 5 has been dubbed as the enabler for the European Space Agency, allowing scientists to conduct much more advanced, complicated missions, including interplanetary science. The biggest takeaway from the Ariane 5 is that there needs to be an increase in modularity and a reduction in costs. Ariane 6 will improve on these specific aspects in order to increase commercial viability. Thank you very much for listening.